Well, getting more details and still highlighting this Africa continental trade signing. We're going to Abuja this time for that. Mark?
Indeed, Chamberlain, a lot of reactions still trailing this, but I think it's time we took an objective look at this policy and see what it actually holds for us, if there are challenges, and see what it is that we need to do to overcome those challenges. We have with us this morning Professor Ken Ife, who is a macroeconomic policy analyst, and he joins us in our Abuja studios. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, you have seen the president has just returned from Niamey, and after 1 year of delaying on signing this free trade deal, we said not yet in 2018. Let us take a very critical look at this. We're not quite sure yet, and we had our fears. Now it's been decided that we should sign this, and the president has signed indeed. But there are people who at home are still saying they don't think we're still ready for this policy, even though, well, ready or not, it has come now. What was your reaction when you heard that the president was going to Niamey and this was going to be one of the things he was going to do?
Well, it is fait accompli because Nigeria is the main event waiting to happen in the context of Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And so it was a date with destiny. Now, this whole thing began in Nigeria. Remember, in 1980, we had a 1980 to 2000 Lagos Plan of Action. And this was the very beginning when we were looking more on production, agriculture, and all of that stuff. Then in 1991, we had Abuja Treaty, Abuja Africa Economic Community Treaty. Very robust, very detailed treaty. But it suddenly went to sleep. It wasn't until 2012 that they came back again and then had a timetable from 2012 to 2017 for collapsing of the regional economic communities and all the steps that had to be taken before we now move to the AfCFTA. And in fact, the acceleration was led by a Nigerian ambassador with the acceleration to prepare the document ready for signing. But unfortunately, or fortunately, the president intervened, and correctly so, he did, because the thing is, you have to compare like to like. I was the DFID trade advisor to Nigeria 2011, 2012, when we were looking at WTO, Trade Facilitation Agreement. And we had all the donor agencies sitting with 24 partners, development agencies, our own agencies, trade agencies. So we worked for 1 year on this, consulting heavily and even doing texts, capacity building, before I now led them to go around and do all the iterative steps and consultation. It was very deep consultation. That's why you didn't actually see anybody talk about. We didn't even know when it was signed. But it was a slightly different case here because it was rushed. So the president listened to dissenting voices, and he did what he should do. That is, call the bluff and so much pressure on him to sign. I said, look, I want to understand this, and I want to consult more deeply, and he did. And in fact, apart from the fact that he has now gone to sign, he has actually done more than we expected him to do, because he knows his own limits. He has signed. Now we have to go to the assembly, ratify quickly. The reason is this: they have to do this quickly because when the instrument is deposited with WTO, we're all part of WTO. Once you deposit this instrument with WTO, normally others will have to come by accession. And accession means that your application will have to be tossed across all those members to say, and then when conditions that you would have negotiated, instrument that you would have negotiated, you don't have that chance anymore. You just have to accept them as a condition of entry. So we'll have to rush that. Then secondly, we have to look at the policy environment. In fact, before you even look at that, look at institutional framework, because we need to have a minister that talks about regional integration. We contribute 60 to 70% of ECOWAS funding. And then Nigeria was among the 5 heads of state, Obasanjo, that set up NEPAD. We contribute the most in Africa. We contribute, the Africa Union, we contribute the most in NEPAD. But you can't see where Nigeria is in all this scheme. So where is the minister representing regional integration? It's a very serious agenda. But you don't know where the person is. Wherever that position or role is hiding, if it's in front of, bring it out. It should be either a minister or attached to a minister. That role should be attached to a minister, so that you have institutional thing there to defend and fight. And so that's very important. Then you also need a policy environment that will be very enabling. For example, we need to have a strategy, ACFT strategy, and then integrate that strategy into our economic recovery and growth plan, so that there's a special section dealing with this. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do, all the sectors.
I find it interesting. I mean, you have provided a historical context for this FCTA signing. It didn't just happen out of the blues. We have been a driver, it would seem, from your recollection in making this happen. Now, in a world where you find that more countries, well, indeed some countries are opening their borders, but some, even the big powers, are becoming more introverted, so to speak. They're thinking of themselves first. For instance, the United States is saying America first. How do you suggest that countries open their borders at the same time, protect their, if the economy is fragile, especially in the light of agreements like this?
Now, there are two opening of borders. There is internal borders for regional economic cooperation and integration. There's an external borders, and we have different aspects. Okay, let me explain that. There are 3 steps in regional economic integration. We're actually on step level 1. Level 1 is Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is common market. Then there's a level 2 customs union, which with the one major instrument there is common external tariff. And we've moved very far in ECOWAS in that we've already signed the tariff. What we haven't done is a regional trade policy, because you need that to collapse into a customs union where you now collect money and distribute it equally based on some formula. Then the third level, which is the highest level, is a monetary union. That is where we've moved somewhere there, but we're not there yet. The heads of states, they call it ECO. You know, but we're not there yet, but we'll move somewhere there.
Yeah, but that was for ECOWAS, I think.
That's for ECOWAS. But no, the reason, let me give you the connection. At the moment, on the Africa scene, we are doing level 1. Now, in level 2, you don't have to go through this kind of process. It will now be accession. So those who are interested in joining ECOWAS, the ECOWAS economy, will have to accede to that. Those who want to join the monetary economy will have to accede. So, you know, that's why we have to lead, because we're already up there. We have to lead. And then coming to your border, the internal borders, we have answers to those, because I keep saying there's nobody that has the most to gain than Nigeria in this African experiment, because we have so much to give to Africa and we have so much to receive. 80% of the industries in Nigeria today are dependent on imported raw materials. Would you believe? Name it, steel, name it. Even the juice, we are the biggest producer of agricultural produce and juice, foods, but we still import $2 billion on concentrates. And because of our agroecological zone, which is in a belt, where, you know, that's why we can't give much to ourselves in ECOWAS. But there are other arid zones in the north and in the south of South Africa. Apple is, everything we need is grown in Africa, because Africa covers the whole agroecological zone. So we should transfer some of those trades to Africa. Let's source some of our inputs from Africa. In the same way, we have so much to give in terms of exporting. Take, for example, if we refine our petrol, we supply the whole petrol to everybody in Africa. Is there a problem? If we do our petrochemicals, we supply to all of them. And in the same way, mining products, if we have partnership with South Africa on mining, you can go and write the books on our foreign exchange, because half of their income comes from mining. But why are they not strongly partnering up? They are already here doing business with DSTV, with MTN, ShopRite, name it. They are here. But there are many things that we could do in partnership with them. But the biggest instrument, as far as I'm concerned, is the trade dispute resolution mechanism in the FCTA. Now, we don't have similar thing in ECOWAS. That's why when Ghana kicks, we go to ECOWAS Court of Justice and they say, well, they don't have jurisdiction. Their jurisdiction is on human rights. But here, we have some instrument here to fight the xenophobic attack of South Africa and Angola. So we can invoke those. And instead, in the part of our strategizing for AfCFTA, we should actually be looking at a more proactive stance on economic diplomacy, on trade reciprocity. And then say, look, you give and you take. So we have to be, if there's any infraction, then we will have all the inspectors crawling all over the country that has that infraction.
But there's still people who are scared. People who say, I mean, you are seeing the pros. You're only seeing the major positives, that we have so much to give. There are people who are saying, but our industries are still not competitive. the cost of production in Nigeria is quite high. What are the chances that we will not be losing jobs to other African countries where the cost of production could be lower and Nigeria could end up being a dumping ground? I mean, there were fears of that, I think, before now, where we did not sign on time. The president was afraid that other African countries could be used as conduit pipes to make sure that before Nigeria will turn a dumping ground for other goods coming from outside.
Let me address that. Now, infrastructure deficiency is so acute in Nigeria that if you're going to wait until you solve these problems, we're going to be lost in transit. I'm telling you, we can't wait until you solve all these problems. Then I'm going to give an example of Algeria, is it, that did 10,000 megawatts in 18 months. And it's taking us 18 years to add 1,000 megawatts to our grid, and at 3 times the cost. That sums up that story. Secondly, South Africa of 45 million people have 40,000 megawatts. Nigeria with 202 million, 5 times that number, 4 times that number, has only 4,500, 5,000 megawatts.
South Africa, so they have 54 million people now.
54, yeah, that's correct. But then the thing is that on a per capita basis, they have 40 times more power than Nigeria. But that is not a disadvantage that means we won't be part of this game. We have to be we have to be in it. Now, if you look at Inga, one of the things that we can get is power pool. Inga to DR Congo, they are delivering 40,000, they plan to deliver 40,000 megawatts. And we can get 10,000 megawatts of that through a power pool because they're already heading to Cameroon. So what does it take to cross to Nigeria? And we can take 10,000 megawatts. South Africa is getting over 25,000 megawatts from Congo. So, you know, that's one advantage of being in. Second advantage is the transportation asymmetry that we have, which is a big time, because apart from power that costs about 30% of the input cost, there's transportation at least 20%. Now, let me tell you about the transportation advantage. The closest and cheapest point in Africa for import from Asia, China, Japan, Southeast Asia is Mombasa in Deep Sea Port in Kenya. The cheapest from North America, South America, Canada, Europe, Russia is actually Nigeria trade hub in Nigeria. And look at how many deep sea ports we are getting into. Lekki Deep Sea Port, Ibaka Deep Sea Port. That is a huge transport hub. And in both ends, goods will arrive, container will arrive at $1,500 at both ends. Now, to come and move it from there through South Africa to down to Nigeria, you add another $1,000. Now, but if you have the LAMU corridor, transit corridor, railway line, and the Mombasa railway coming in, they're already heading to Cameroon. What does it take to close it? So what you are now going to have is huge economy. Now, when the goods arrive, in 2-3 days, they will cross the continent. Now, can you look at the economy, the size? Otherwise, how are you going to do? What are you going to do with 3-4 deep sea ports in Nigeria? It's going to be, you won't be able to gain anything out of it. It's going to be so much capital intensive and serving who? Serving only Nigeria. But now you have a huge opportunity that we can turn the page. Now, let's look at just that 1,000.
Serving only Nigeria, there are countries that are landlocked.
Those landlocked countries will have movement. I want to tell you the significant advantage. When a container arrives at $1,500 in Nigeria, it goes back at $500, which means $2,000. But because we don't, it goes empty. The real cost now becomes $3,000. So you divide it by 2, 1,515. But because it is 500, we now have to pay 2,500 to import into Nigeria because we are paying for empty container going back. But that will not be the case when you are using the transcontinental corridor to link the trade. So there's huge advantage. Mining product, what you call it is, you call it backhaul capacity.
Okay, let's go to Lagos now and take a question or two from my colleagues.
Yeah, Prof, let me just speak to this concern because some manufacturers raised some concerns which I'm sure you're aware of about the signing of this agreement. For instance, some of those who produce rice, they say the government has this plan to ensure that we're self-sufficient when it comes to rice. But then the cost of the locally produced rice is more expensive than even the imported ones. Now, they say that part of what they identified as a problem was because the borders. So those policies notwithstanding, people still smuggle this product, and that's why people ordinarily go for the cheaper one than the ones that they are producing here. So they still have that headache of us implementing some of our policies here. Is that not a concern now that we are signatory to this AfCFTA?
I agree with you. It's a major concern. But let me tell you this. The president has actually exercised his powers. He's not waiting. He's not trusting anybody on this issue. He has done what he has to do. Stop this whole process, drill down, let everybody come on board. He has done that. He's gone to sign. He's passed the baton to the assembly. Please ratify it quickly. But the president has actually gone beyond this to use presidential powers. He has done presidential directive on 10 value chains and has pushed CBN to act on this. And CBN is doing that right now. Then he has also, on this demand side, used Presidential Order 003 to say you must buy local, all government establishments, you must trade local, procurement, you have to give premium on locally produced goods. He's hammering them on the demand and supply side. And on the third one is compliance. He's backed CBN on compliance and say, look, you try it and then you will get blacklisted. Stop all this nonsense of smuggling goods. We are losing customs revenue. Dumping goods, two things. One, you are dumping goods that are substandard and injurious to our health. Two, you are actually undermining the productive capacity of our economy. In two ways, actually. There are constituencies out there, government out there that are subsidizing their products to enter into Nigerian market because we have a huge market. And that is unfair competition. So I should have our trade minister jumping up and down and going to WTO and laying complaint, asking for safeguard measures and all of that. But the president has actually acted by giving that support, tacit support to compliance. You said, you talked about compliance. Yeah, compliance is the big issue in Nigeria. We have beautiful plans, but they don't even look at the plan. They put it on the shelf. You know, so now you have presidential directives on three aspects: compliance, demand, and supply. So I think it's not going to be business as usual. That I can assure you.
All right, let me also say this. I mean, trade negotiation is not new to you. But man, they say they also had this independent study, which was done by the Nigeria Office for Trade Negotiation, NOTN. And in those recommendations, which was part of the concern they initially had before, while they were asking us to look into this properly before we sign. And if I could read that, it stated that we didn't have any specific attention, wasn't given to determine the cost and benefit analysis of the agreement. They also say the sectors and subsectors that will benefit or be worse off as a result of the agreement are unknown. No clear-cut recommendation on strategies that the government would adopt to enhance the capacity of the manufacturing sector to compete effectively. Do you think those concerns have been addressed?
Look, you know, I started by saying that one of the action points, apart from the legislative side, which I have mentioned, apart from the fact that we need a cabinet minister or added to a role for a particular minister to do that institutional framework, I've also talked about the policy framework. We need to have a strategy, or we can call it AfCFTA strategy, which addresses with its action plans, which are cross-sectoral action plans, what has to be done, and then incorporate this in a revised EIGP plan. I said that. And then I have said that the president has not even waited for this document. He has kicked it off by using those instruments, presidential instruments at his disposal. So we're moving. We are actually moving, but we should do more. We should do more. We should have that strategy as part of a wider regional economic strategy in Africa. And then make sure that ECOWAS is not escaping. We have to make sure, because we have issues in ECOWAS. You can also see what Dangote says in moving his products from Nigeria to Ghana. How many tariffs that he has to face? About 15 of them in Benin, 19 in Togo, and 10 in Ghana. So by the time his goods arrives in Ghana, it's effectively 39% more expensive. The effective tariff has gone up to about 39%. So these are challenges, and yet we are implementing ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme, and then we are having all that, let alone when you are facing 54 countries on the continent. So there are real problems. But I said we have to capture them in a strategy, and then the action plans, which are cross-sectoral, so every department knows what they have to do as part of this, and incorporate it into a living document, which is our ARPG document. Obviously, that has to be revised. But as I said, the president has not waited for anybody. He didn't want to wait. He has kicked off using every power at within him to actually get the ball rolling with those presidential initiatives and compliance and all of that. But the thing is, now the focus seems to be on CBN. Now we must ask other policies to kick in. We need more fiscal response. We need more trade policy response, investment policy response, trade investors. They all have to join in. They shouldn't leave it all to CBN. And this was what happened in 2016 when we had the recession. Everybody was standing aside, and it was just CBN that was fighting. So no, we should have everybody join hand. All other policies have to join hand.
You say that if we had waited for the entire structures in our country to be set right first before we go into this agreement to be part of this initiative, then we would have been somewhere between the devil and the deep blue sea, and as such not achieving anything at the end of the day. But what then would you say to people who think, for instance, say, if electricity doesn't work in Nigeria, industrialization is going to be a far cry, and we wouldn't even have anything to put in those empty containers at the end of the day to take out of this country for our own gains?
Well, what I would say to that is work in progress. All those infrastructure deficiencies are work in progress. Now, let me tell you, I looked at capital importation report late last week. And if you look at, we had a massive gain, 216% increase in capital importation report, although it's skewed in favor of portfolio investment. But there was something in there. When I disaggregated all the data, I found out that the source, although UK was 4.5 billion, that tells you something about Brexit and the potential impact you could have, who could do something. Then you have $1.5 billion coming from US. Then after UAE, 1 billion, who is the next? South Africa, nearly 800 million. And who comes after? 8 African countries investing heavily in Nigeria. They've seen something that we have not seen. They've seen something because they have so much confidence in investing in Nigeria. But I also went to look at the channels of this investment flowing. I'm very interested, nearly 85% of that are from 3 South African banks, Stanbic, Standard, and the South Africa Rand. Does that not tell you something? And when you connect this to the preponderance of the successful South African companies being in Nigeria, MTN, DSTV, ShopRite, so we need to use this strategy. We have to use them. We now know who we should be talking to, who would work with us. And I mean, look, if you compare Nigeria and South Africa, now that I've identified that, South Africa, we are the big brother. There's no doubt about that. But South Africa is our younger brother, but most industrialized in Africa, most infrastructure. But it is a mature economy in decline. And they know that. Margins are squeezed. The margins are in Nigeria. Where you have infrastructure deficiency is high risk investment, but it is high return. They know that. They don't need to, you don't preach to the converted. So why don't you work with them? Why don't you work with them? Because they have the presence, they have the resources. There's nothing you need to get from some of these Western countries. You don't get from there.
Now,
so let's work.
Indeed. I mean, we are high risk and high yield. And I'm sure, as you said, a lot of countries can see that. But there's also the question of transport within Africa. You talked about how a lot of African countries, you know, export raw materials outside the country. We still import a lot of our raw materials, but perhaps maybe not from African countries. Transport within Africa is still an issue. How do you think that this will be? It's not going to go away overnight with the signing of this agreement, is it?
No, it will go away. I'll tell you why. Because heavy investment in Central Africa and South Africa has been on rail infrastructure. They have they have Cape to coast, from Cape Town all the way to Cairo. They have a lot of them cross-Crispin Africa. I mentioned LAMU rail corridor, and then the Mombasa. They're all heading from that side of Kenya all the way to Cameroon. So Nigeria has very little to invest to connect, and then we unleash in the whole continent. We also have a sea link.
Sir, let me ask you to hold your thoughts. You'll finish your thoughts when we come back from this break. Please stay with us. Professor Ken Ife is still here. He is a macroeconomic policy analyst, and we're talking about the pros and cons of the AfCFTA, that's the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Now, you were talking about transport, and you were talking about ports from Mombasa and even from Cape Coast in, is it Cape Coast
yeah,
now?
Cape to Coast.
Cape
yes.
to Coast. Now, people will say, where is that infrastructure here in Nigeria? And, or even in the ECOWAS region. We're not seeing any such infrastructure, are we?
Yes. It's on the plan, but it's happening very, very slowly. The last investment in rail in Nigeria was 1927. But just now, you could see that in the last administration, there was tempo. And you can even see the chaos in Lagos, Ibadan, not Ibadan, Abuja to Kaduna. Just see how oversubscribed, how packed it is. It just gives you a feel of what could happen when we do more on the rail transport. But the good thing about the transport network coming in from the rail, coming in from Mombasa down here, is the multimodal nature. Because you are going to combine that with a strategic seaport hub in Nigeria, which is you already have deep capacity in Lekki. You have all that's coming in, Ibaka. You have Bayelsa looking for, you have River State looking for Bonny Deep Seaport. Let me tell you, deep seaport, let me tell you, when the Panamax comes, it stays in the high sea, and 4 or 5 ships will go there and transship and bring 4,000 containers.
That's
or 5
the mother boats and the daughter boats.
To Apapa. But when the Panamax enters to the deep sea port, instead of 4,000 containers in a ship, you have 16,000 containers. So where are the rails to evacuate it? Otherwise, you're going to have a massive gridlock. So that is the advantage. You have both the sea and then the land. Now, what is the rail is the cheapest, most effective, and most economical means of transporting large goods at long distances. So they change the economy completely when you have rail transport. And then when you combine it with a sea strategic hub, you are talking about a different planet. Now, secondly, let me tell you, big advantage for Nigeria is new investment decisions. If Coca-Cola wants to build an ultra-modern new factory in Africa, which will cost minimum will be $250 million. If they want to build for $500 million or $1 billion, it's Nigeria that are going to build it, nowhere else. Because Nigeria guarantees offtake of what they produce, 202 million people. And then Nigeria is nearly at the heart of Africa to distribute. So, and then already is sitting comfortably in a 500 million ECOWAS market. Do you see why the decision it has to be Nigeria? Then secondly, I keep saying, why don't we take a bold plan to China? Call it Sino-Nigeria $100 billion investment. I'm not saying borrow, investment, and target it to the 34 export-free zones. Now, this is about seizing opportunities. When you talk about strategy, grabbing opportunities. Now, look at the spat going on between America and China, and they're facing tariff rising to 25%. Get these guys here to assemble their things and manufacture, and they hit back to America at 0 tariff using the AGOA. It's not rocket science. Nigeria guarantees 40% because they're already in our market, and we're saying we don't want you to dump these goods.
I think AGOA is now under review. It's not like that.
It has how many more years? About 10 years. Now, you have them going all over Africa. So you will have to be in AfCFTA to be able to ensure that if these guys come here to dump this money and do the business, the goods are guaranteed to flow all over Africa. And this is where they would want to come. They're not going to take 100 billion investment and go and put it in Zambia or put it in a small country.
Well, it depends on the scale it depends on the scale of production or the scale of economics, so to speak. But let's quickly take more questions now from our colleagues in Lagos.
Oh, Prof, I'm wondering what will this encapsulate or mean for the indigenous manufacturers in this country, especially when you consider that we have a huge middle class to build, and how manufacturing in this country can be seen at the micro level, such that we are able to stimulate this economy more and have locally made goods being able to compete at the international level.
Okay, given what I have just said about the propensity to get investors in here for manufacturing purposes and the wider market, we have local content law that is gone out to ensure that you are socially, economically sustainable in the sense that you now have to make sure that you are procuring as much as possible. The law is there. Now we have a strategy to deliver that. And I have also told you about the presidential initiative where I said the president wasn't waiting for your document. He has just used his power to give directive to CBN, these 10 value chains, I want you to put money there. And CBN has actually said to all the players, I am going to fund land clearing, land development, even the seed production, processing, all the way to the market. That hasn't happened on this scale before. And then the president didn't stop there. He says, I'm behind you. Target all those who are smuggling and undermining my industries and deal with them, blacklist them. It's there. And it's not just smuggling, but dumping. Dumping is so injurious to our infant industries. Then he also gone to the demand side and said, I want to support this. Presidential Order 003, you must buy local. And you know the impact of this on procurement is, it means that when Nigerian made goods are competing with internationally sourced goods, we can get a premium of up to 10%. In other words, we can be higher because of our higher input costs. So the law allows the procurement to buy made in Nigeria because the presidential directive is there. The law has moved. So all of these are extraordinary attempts to ensure that we protect the industries. But having said that, we also need to do our homework on building competitiveness. We have to do our homework. Look at export competitiveness. You know, I can't understand why we refuse. We are so adamant that we will do things the way we want to do it and the way we always done it.
Professor,
and it can't wash. You are not going to export these products unless you follow and meet the conformity assessment requirements.
Professor, let's take this one step, just a little step forward. You've talked the other time, this same conversation we're having now, you've talked the other time about, you know, employment and all of that. I still haven't, in all of these that you have said, a lot of talk has been about trade, you know, but I'm trying to see, you know, because the viewer is waiting to see, okay, how do I as an individual plug into this? How does this promote employment on the one hand? And secondly, you've just talked about, you know, our productive capacity now. Many people would rather buy imported as opposed to the local ones. How does this help to reduce cost of production, given the kind of infrastructure that we have at the moment?
Okay, one of the ways of living with high infrastructure deficiency is to have clustered approach, because you realize that so many things are working against our MSMEs. One of them is access to finance. The other one are infrastructure deficiencies, power, transportation, and all of that. And there are many more, many more. So we're coming around this by using cluster mechanisms, because when you get people to work together, then you reduce the asymmetries, and then you have some scale, and that's one. The second one, of course, which CBN has been doing, is on, you know, using their anchor borrowers program to have aggregators, anchors, who are providing strategic support to an army of subsistence farmers, and actually meeting them at their point of needs by saying to them, okay, rather than go and own 1,000 hectares and then employ 200 or 400, oh, I'm going to work with 1,000 farmers, each one on one hectare. That is their comfort zone. So what are you going to give to them? You have an organization. You are the aggregator. So train them, yes, supply them with seeds that are certified and you know that is going to be export compliant. Then supervise them, have about 100 extension workers who go and visit them. Then have a buyback agreement. All the inputs required will be given to them, certified inputs, and you know that they're appropriate. Fertilizer going to give in are known to be responsive fertilizers, because you are mixing. We have how many blending plants now? A lot of them now in Nigeria. So it's no longer about buying billions of dollars and then sending. No. We now have a more appropriate fertilizer regime targeted to the particular soil. So, and then you have an offtake agreement over the next 10 years. You know, you're going to be buying from them. So they don't worry about transportation. They don't worry about, you know, this is creative and it's happening. You go to Kebbi, you see it on rice. Look at other value chains. It's going to be deployed in other value chains. So we have a two-track.
Professor, you know, this morning, it's interesting that the Daily Trust is carrying a story. Multinational threatens local poultry farmers. That's the front page of Daily Trust this morning. And all that you have said, very much in order, but some people also say that perhaps we should put safeguards in place for the small industries as well. But we'll see how. We hope that Nigeria makes the most of it, because whether or not it is here, and we are now a party to it. Let us see how it proceeds in the coming days. We have to thank you very much for coming
my pleasure.
On Sunrise Daily this morning. Professor Ken Ife is a macroeconomic policy analyst, and we've been talking about the pros and cons of Nigeria signing the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Sunrise Daily continues in a moment. Please stay with us.